Chapter 1. The Bleeding Shadow. The storm came without warning. Sera had been walking the forest trail for hours, her worn backpack digging into her shoulders, her feet numb inside boots that had seen better days. She'd left Crescent Falls 3 days ago, with nothing but the clothes on her back and $47 in crumpled bills. She hadn't looked back, not at the pack house, not at Marcus standing in the doorway with his new mate pressed against his side, not at the life she'd spent 23 years trying to belong to. Rejected. The word still burned in her chest like a brand. "Your bloodline is too weak," the Alpha had said, his voice cold and clinical. "The pack cannot afford an Omega who produces no power, no strength. Marcus has chosen a suitable mate. You have 1 week to leave our territory." Sera had left in 3 days. Now, as lightning split the sky and rain hammered through the canopy above, she realized she'd made a terrible mistake. She should have gone to the human towns, should have found a bus station, should have done anything except wander into the neutral territories where rogues hunted and pack law didn't reach. Thunder rolled overhead, so loud it shook her teeth. Sera stumbled forward, squinting through the downpour, searching for any kind of shelter. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in the last hour, and her jacket, thin, cheap, bought from a thrift store when she was 16, did nothing against the cold. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. Low, guttural, wet, a cross between a growl and a whimper. Sera froze. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Rogues made sounds like that, wounded animals desperate and dangerous. She'd been taught since childhood. Never approach an injured predator. Never trust what you find in the woods. But something pulled at her chest. Something that felt like invisible fingers wrapped around her ribs, tugging her forward. She took a step toward the sound. Then another. "This is stupid," she whispered to herself. "This is how people die in horror movies." But her feet kept moving. The sound came again, weaker this time. Sera pushed through a tangle of wet undergrowth and nearly fell into a small ravine. At the bottom, half hidden beneath a fallen oak, she saw it. A wolf, the largest wolf she'd ever seen. Its fur was midnight black, soaked with rain and something darker. Blood. So much blood. It pooled beneath the massive body, mixing with the mud, turning the ground into a crimson marsh. The wolf's side heaved with labored breaths, and one of its back legs was bent at an unnatural angle. Sera's medical training, limited as it was, kicked in automatically. She'd been the pack's unofficial healer, the one who patched up the young wolves after their first shifts, who treated the warriors too proud to see a real doctor. It was the only thing that had kept her useful, kept her from being cast out years earlier. She slid down the ravine, her boots losing traction in the mud. The wolf's head lifted weakly, its eyes, bright amber, almost gold, locked onto hers. Sera's breath caught. She'd seen wolf eyes before, had grown up surrounded by them. But these eyes were different. Ancient. Intelligent in a way that made her skin prickle with awareness. They looked at her not with animal fear or aggression, but with something that felt almost like recognition. "Hey," she said softly, raising her hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." The wolf's lips pulled back slightly, revealing blood-stained teeth. Not a threat, a grimace of pain. Sera crept closer, her heart hammering. This close, she could see the extent of the injuries. Deep gashes across the wolf's shoulder, the broken leg, and something worse. A wound in its side that looked like it had been made by claws. Big claws. Bear, maybe, or another shifter. "Oh, you're in bad shape," she breathed. She shrugged off her backpack with trembling fingers, pawing through it for the first aid kit she'd grabbed from the pack house. It wasn't much. Bandages, antiseptic, painkillers meant for humans. Nothing that could truly help a creature this size. The wolf watched her, those golden eyes never leaving her face. "I don't know if you can understand me," Sera said, her voice shaking now from cold and adrenaline. "But I'm going to try to help. This is going to hurt." She opened the antiseptic with numb fingers. The wolf didn't move as she pressed her hands against the worst of the wounds, didn't snap at her when she used strips from her spare shirt to create makeshift bandages. It only watched her with those impossibly intelligent eyes, its breathing gradually slowing from panicked gasps to something more controlled. Sera worked in the rain, her fingers going numb, her clothes soaked through. She'd learned basic field medicine from the pack's older healers, had studied everything she could get her hands on, desperate to be useful, to be needed. Now those skills poured out of her automatically. "You need a real doctor," she murmured, tying off another bandage. "These aren't going to hold for long. And that leg, God, that leg needs to be set properly." The wolf made a sound low in its throat, almost like agreement. Sera sat back on her heels, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her shaking and cold and acutely aware of how alone she was, how vulnerable. "I can't carry you," she said quietly. "You're too big. But there's a cave system about a mile north. I passed it earlier today. If you can make it there, I can—" She trailed off. "I don't know. Figure something out." The wolf stared at her for a long moment. Then, with a visible effort that made Sera's chest ache, it rolled onto its stomach. The broken leg dragged uselessly, and fresh blood seeped through the bandages, but the massive creature pulled itself forward. "Wait, no. You're going to hurt yourself worse." But the wolf kept moving, inch by agonizing inch. Sera scrambled to her feet. Okay, let me help." She didn't know what possessed her to do it. The wolf could kill her with one snap of those massive jaws, but she moved to its uninjured side, wedging her shoulder under its chest, taking as much weight as her small frame could handle. Together, they began the slow, painful journey through the storm. Lightning illuminated their path in stark flashes. Thunder drowned out the sound of Sera's ragged breathing, the wolf's labored pants. Her muscles screamed. Her boots slipped in the mud, but she kept moving, kept half carrying, half guiding this impossible creature through the rain. "Almost there," she gasped, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring the wolf or herself. The cave mouth appeared like a blessing, dark, dry, sheltered from the worst of the weather. Sera helped guide the wolf inside, and the moment they crossed the threshold, the massive animal collapsed. Sera collapsed beside it, her chest heaving, her entire body shaking with exhaustion and cold. For several minutes, neither of them moved. They simply lay there in the darkness, listening to the storm rage outside, their breaths gradually synchronizing. Finally, Sera forced herself to sit up. She needed to check the bandages, needed to do something about the broken leg, needed to keep the wolf from going into shock. She reached out, hesitating for just a moment before placing her hand on the wolf's massive head. The fur was soft beneath her fingers. Warm despite the rain, the wolf's eyes opened, finding hers in the darkness, and Sera felt it again, that pull. That strange, impossible connection that didn't make any sense. "Who are you?" she whispered. The wolf didn't answer, but something in those ancient amber eyes made her think it understood the question. Made her think that when it could answer, she might not believe what it had to say. Outside, the storm howled. Inside the cave, a wounded wolf and a rejected Omega huddled together against the dark, two broken souls bound by chance and fate, and something neither of them could name yet, something that would change everything. Chapter 2. The vigil Sera woke to silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie stillness broken only by the steady drip of water from the cave entrance and the wolf's labored breathing. Gray dawn light filtered through the opening, weak and watery, barely enough to see by. She'd fallen asleep sitting upright against the cave wall, her hand still resting on the wolf's flank. Now, as consciousness returned in slow waves, she realized three things simultaneously. She was freezing cold, her entire body ached, and the wolf was burning up. "No, no, no," she whispered, pressing her palm more firmly against its side. Fever. The wolf had developed a fever overnight, which meant infection had already set in. Without proper antibiotics, without real medical intervention, the creature wouldn't survive another day. Sera's throat tightened. She'd spent the entire night keeping vigil, changing bandages when she could, using what little remained in her first aid kit. She'd even sacrificed her last bottle of water, dribbling it between the wolf's teeth, grateful when she felt it swallow. But it wasn't enough. "I don't know what to do," she said aloud, her voice cracking. I'm sorry. I'm not a real healer. I'm just an Omega who learned from books and desperation. The wolf's ear twitched at her voice. Sera felt tears burning behind her eyes. This was so stupid. She should be grieving her own loss, figuring out her own survival. Instead, she was breaking down over a wild animal she'd known for less than 12 hours, except it didn't feel like a wild animal. Even unconscious, even dying, there was something about this wolf that felt more. Something that called to a part of her she'd spent years trying to suppress. The part that still believed in pack bonds, in fated connections, in the old magic the elders whispered about. You can't die, she said firmly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I didn't drag you through a storm just to watch you give up. She checked her backpack again, hoping she'd somehow missed supplies. She hadn't. Just empty wrappers, a broken phone charger, and a photo she'd almost thrown away a dozen times, her and Marcus, taken before he'd known she was powerless, before everything fell apart. Sera stared at the photo for a moment, then deliberately shoved it into the corner of her bag. She had to focus. The wolf needed more than bandages and hope. It needed medicine, needed proper healing, which meant she'd have to leave the cave, venture into territory she didn't know, and hope she found something, anything that could help. But first, she needed to address the broken leg. Sera gathered what little courage she had left and moved to examine the injury more closely in the growing light. The leg was definitely broken, the bone visible through torn flesh. It made her stomach turn, but she forced herself to look, to assess. She'd seen the pack healers set bones before. Had even assisted once, holding down a young wolf who'd fallen from a tree during his first hunt. The memory was visceral, the sound of bone grinding back into place, the howls of pain, the way the healer had moved with absolute confidence. Sera had no such confidence. I need you to stay still, she told the wolf, though it was barely conscious. This is going to hurt. I'm sorry. She found 2 sturdy branches outside the cave, tested their strength, then used the last of her bandages and strips from her jacket to create a splint. Her hands shook the entire time. When she finally worked up the nerve to touch the broken leg, the wolf's eyes snapped open, those amber eyes locked onto hers, suddenly alert despite the fever, despite the pain. Sera froze, her breath caught in her chest. I have to set it, she whispered. I know it hurts, but if I don't, you'll never walk again. The wolf held her gaze for an impossibly long moment. Then, deliberately, it laid its head back down. Permission. Trust. Sera's heart stuttered. She worked as quickly as she dared, feeling for the break, positioning the bone. When she had to pull the leg straight, the wolf's entire body went rigid, a low whine escaping its throat that sounded almost human in its anguish. But it didn't snap at her, didn't pull away. It let her hurt it to help it. Sera secured the splint with trembling fingers, tying the bandages tight enough to hold but not so tight they'd cut off circulation. When she finished, she sat back, exhausted and shaking. Done, she breathed. It's done. The wolf's breathing had gone ragged again, but those eyes remained on her face. Watching. Always watching. Sera reached out without thinking and gently stroked the space between its ears. The fur was damp with fever sweat, matted with blood and mud, but still impossibly soft. You're going to be okay, she promised, though she had no right to make such a promise. I'll figure something out. I'll find help. The wolf made a sound low in its throat, not quite a growl, not quite a whimper, something that felt like gratitude. Sera spent the next hour searching the surrounding forest for anything useful. She found wild herbs she recognized from her studies. Yarrow for bleeding, plantain leaves for infection. She mashed them between rocks with rainwater, creating a crude poultice that she carefully applied to the worst wounds. It wasn't much, but it was something. When she returned to the cave, she found the wolf had managed to drag itself further inside, away from the entrance where the temperature was dropping again. Sera followed, settling beside it, her back against the cave wall. I should introduce myself properly, she said quietly, pulling her knees to her chest. I'm Sera Whitmore, former Omega of the Crescent Falls Pack. Current nobody. The wolf's ear twitched. I don't know why I helped you, she continued, surprised by how easy it was to talk to this creature. Easier than talking to anyone in her pack had ever been. Maybe because I know what it's like to be thrown away, to be left to die because you're not strong enough, not useful enough. She laughed bitterly. My ex-mate, Marcus, he rejected me 3 days ago. Said my bloodline was too weak to produce strong pups. The alpha gave me a week to leave, but I couldn't stay there. Couldn't watch him with her. The wolf shifted slightly, and Sera realized its head was now resting against her leg. Her breath caught. Slowly, carefully, she lowered her hand to rest on its massive head. I don't even know if you're a shifter or just a wolf, she whispered. But it doesn't matter, does it? We're both alone now, both rejected by the world we knew. The wolf's eyes drifted closed, but it pressed closer to her warmth. Sera sat there in the growing darkness, her hand stroking the wolf's fur, feeling the fever still burning beneath her palm. Outside, night fell over the forest. Inside the cave, an impossible bond deepened between two souls who had nothing left to lose. Don't die on me, Sera whispered. Please, I can't watch someone else I care about slip away. The words hung in the air, and Sera realized with a start that she meant them. Somehow, in less than a day, this mysterious creature had become important to her. Had become hers to protect. The wolf's breathing evened out slightly, as if her presence alone helped ease its pain, and as Sera finally allowed herself to doze, her head tilting to rest against the cave wall, she didn't see the way the wolf's form seemed to shimmer in the darkness, didn't notice how the massive paws looked almost like they wanted to become hands, or how the fever-induced tremors looked almost like a shift trying to happen. She didn't know that the wolf she was protecting was fighting two battles, one against death, and one against a transformation that would reveal exactly who had stumbled into her care. All she knew was that tomorrow, she'd have to find real help. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, in the darkness, they had each other, and somehow, that was enough. Chapter 3. The unwanted visitor dawn came too soon, and brought with it a problem Sera hadn't anticipated. She woke to the sound of voices outside the cave. Male voices, rough and aggressive, speaking in the clipped tones of shifters discussing territory. Picked up a blood trail 3 miles back. Whatever it was, it's wounded bad. Probably dead by now. That storm was brutal. Dead or not, the Alpha wants us to confirm. No rogues on our land. Those were his orders. Sera's eyes flew open. Her hand was still resting on the wolf's side, and she could feel its heartbeat quicken, could sense it coming alert even as it remained perfectly still. Pack wolves. Hunters. If they found the wolf, they'd kill it. Wounded predators were considered threats, especially in neutral territory where borders were constantly contested. And if they found her with it, they'd have questions she couldn't answer. The voices grew closer. Check that cave system. Natural shelter. Anything smart enough would have holed up there. Sera's mind raced. She looked at the wolf, at its splinted leg and blood-soaked bandages, and knew there was no way it could move fast enough to hide. No way she could protect it if armed shifters came through that entrance, unless she didn't let them get that far. Stay quiet, she whispered, pulling her hand away reluctantly. Don't move, don't make a sound. I'll handle this. The wolf's amber eyes tracked her as she stood, and something in that gaze made her chest ache. Trust. It trusted her to protect it, the same way it had trusted her to set its broken leg. Sera grabbed her backpack, shrugged it on to look like a simple hiker, and stepped out of the cave into the cold morning light. 3 wolves in human form stood about 20 yards away, dressed in the practical cargo pants and boots of pack warriors. They turned as one when she emerged, their eyes immediately assessing, cataloging, dismissing. One of them, tall, sandy-haired, with the build of someone who'd spent years training, stepped forward. His nostrils flared slightly as he scented the air. You're not pack, he said flatly. No, Sera agreed, keeping her voice steady. Just passing through. I sheltered here during the storm. Another warrior, shorter but broader, crossed his arms. Alone? Yes. You smell like blood. the first one said, his eyes narrowing. And something else. Wolf. Sera's heart hammered, but she forced herself to stay calm. She'd spent 23 years around dominant wolves. She knew how to appear submissive, unthreatening. I cut myself on some rocks getting here, she said, holding up her hands to show the scrapes she'd gotten helping the wolf. As for the wolf scent, she gestured vaguely at the forest. This is neutral territory. There are probably pack markers everywhere. The sandy-haired warrior studied her for a long moment. Then he took a step toward the cave entrance. Mind if we take a look? We're tracking something dangerous. For your safety, we should clear the cave. Sera moved to block his path before she could think better of it. The warrior stopped, his eyebrows rising. The other two tensed, hands moving toward the knives at their belts. There's nothing in there, Sera said quickly. Just my campsite. And I'd rather not have strangers going through my things. Miss, the warrior said, his voice taking on a harder edge. We're not asking. We have orders to search all shelters in this area. You can cooperate or we can move you. Sera's mind raced. She couldn't fight 3 trained warriors, couldn't physically stop them. But she had one advantage. She'd been an Omega, which meant she'd learned how to navigate pack politics, how to use perceived weakness as a weapon. I understand, she said, letting her voice waver slightly. She dropped her gaze, shrinking into herself. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be difficult. It's just... She wrapped her arms around herself. I just left my pack. My mate rejected me. Everything I own is in that cave, and I'm scared if I let anyone in, they'll take what little I have left. The words were true enough that her scent wouldn't betray the lie. And she watched the warrior's expressions shift, not to sympathy exactly, but to the mild discomfort dominant wolves always showed around rejected pack members. Bad luck, weakness, something to avoid. We're not interested in your belongings, the sandy-haired warrior said, his voice marginally softer. We're looking for a rogue wolf. Big black fur, probably injured. You haven't seen anything like that? No, Sera said immediately. I haven't seen any wolves at all. Just heard some howling in the distance during the storm. It wasn't technically a lie. She'd heard plenty of howling during the storm, though it had been coming from the creature she was now protecting. The warrior studied her for another long moment, then glanced back at his companions. Some unspoken communication passed between them. All right, he finally said, but if you see anything, any wolf, any strange tracks, you need to leave this area immediately and report to the nearest pack house. We're dealing with something dangerous. What kind of dangerous? Sera asked, trying to sound innocently concerned rather than desperately curious. The kind that killed 3 of our warriors 2 nights ago, the broader warrior said grimly. Something big enough and strong enough to take down trained fighters. So if you're smart, you'll pack up and get back to human territory. Sera's blood ran cold. 3 warriors dead, and they thought the wolf in her cave had done it. But when she'd found the injured creature, it had been barely alive, broken and bleeding. Whatever had attacked it had been powerful enough to nearly kill it, which meant either the wolf had killed those warriors and been mortally wounded in the fight, or something else entirely was hunting these woods. Neither option was comforting. I'll be careful, she managed. Thank you for the warning. The sandy-haired warrior nodded curtly, then jerked his head toward the forest. The 3 of them shifted direction, moving past the cave entrance and deeper into the woods. Sera waited until they were completely out of sight, before releasing the breath she'd been holding. Her legs felt weak, her hands shaking with the aftershock of adrenaline. She turned back to the cave and froze. The wolf was standing in the entrance. Despite the splinted leg, despite the bandages, despite the fever that should have kept it immobile, the massive creature had dragged itself to the cave mouth. It stood on 3 legs, the injured one held carefully off the ground, its amber eyes fixed on the direction the warriors had gone. The growl that rumbled from its chest was deep enough to vibrate through the ground. Hey, Sera said softly, approaching slowly. They're gone. You're safe. The wolf's head swung toward her, and for a moment, she saw something in those eyes that took her breath away. Not animal instinct, but clear, focused intelligence, understanding, and rage. This wolf had understood every word of that conversation, had known those warriors were hunting it, had been ready to fight, injured, fevered, barely able to stand, to protect her if they'd tried to enter the cave. "You heard them," Sera whispered, suddenly certain. "You understood what they said." The wolf held her gaze, and she saw the answer as clearly as if it had spoken. "Yes." Sera's heart pounded. This wasn't just a wolf. This wasn't even just a shifter. This was something else entirely. Something powerful enough to kill trained warriors. Something dangerous enough that an entire pack was hunting it, and she'd saved its life. "What are you?" she breathed. The wolf's eyes gleamed in the morning light, ancient and knowing and utterly inhuman despite the intelligence behind them. Then it swayed on its 3 good legs, the momentary strength fading, and began to collapse. Sera lunged forward, catching the massive head before it could hit the ground. She staggered under the weight, her knees buckling, but she held on. "I've got you," she gasped. "I've got you." The wolf's eyes drifted closed, but not before she saw something in them that made her chest tight. Gratitude, trust, and something deeper. Something that felt like a promise. "I'll protect you too," those eyes seemed to say. "When I can stand again, I'll protect you the way you protected me." Sera carefully lowered the wolf's head to the cave floor, her hands gentle despite the questions screaming through her mind. Whatever this creature was, whatever it had done, it was hers now, and she would keep it safe, even if it meant standing between it and an entire pack of hunters, even if it cost her everything. Chapter 4. Fevered Confessions. By midday, the wolf's fever had worsened. Sera knelt beside the massive body, her hand pressed to its side, feeling the heat radiating through the fur. The wolf's breathing had become shallow and rapid, and occasionally its legs would twitch as if running from something in fever dreams. "You're burning up," she whispered, her throat tight with fear. The herbal poultice had helped slow the bleeding, but it wasn't enough. The wounds needed proper treatment, stitches, antibiotics, the kind of care only a pack healer or veterinarian could provide. And both of those options were impossible now. Sera dipped her last clean shirt into the small pool of rainwater she'd collected near the cave entrance, and gently pressed the cool fabric to the wolf's forehead. It felt absurd, trying to break a fever in a creature this size with nothing but cold water and desperation, but she had to do something. The wolf's eyes fluttered open at her touch, those amber depths glazed with fever but still focused on her face. "I'm here," she murmured, stroking the damp cloth along its muzzle. "I'm not going anywhere." A low whine escaped the wolf's throat, and Sera's heart clenched. In that sound, she heard pain, frustration, and something that sounded almost like an apology. "Don't," she said firmly. "Don't you dare apologize for being hurt, for needing help." Her voice cracked. "I spent my whole life being told I was a burden for needing things, for not being strong enough. I won't let you feel that way." The wolf's gaze sharpened slightly, and Sera had the distinct impression it was really listening, really understanding every word. "I know you're not just a wolf," she continued, the words spilling out now that she'd started. "I don't know what you are exactly, alpha, rogue, something else, but I know you understand me. And I need you to understand this. I don't care what those hunters said. I don't care if you killed their warriors or burned down their pack house or stole their precious territory." She leaned closer, her hand moving from the cloth to rest directly on the wolf's massive head. "You're mine to protect now. That's how it works, isn't it? I saved your life, so now we're bound. Pack law might not recognize it, but something deeper does. I can feel it." The wolf made a sound low in its chest. Not quite a growl, not quite a purr. Its eyes drifted closed, but not before Sera saw something in them that made her breath catch. Recognition, acceptance, and beneath that, something that looked almost like reverence. Hours passed in a haze. Sera alternated between applying cool water, checking bandages, and simply sitting with her hand on the wolf's side, feeling each labored breath. She talked to fill the silence, sharing stories she'd never told anyone. "Marcus proposed to me under the full moon," she said quietly, watching the play of afternoon light across the cave walls. "It was supposed to be romantic, The whole pack gathered, everyone expecting us to complete the mate bond. But when he bit me, when he tried to mark me, nothing happened. She laughed bitterly. No bond formed. No connection sparked. The pack elders examined us both, ran all their tests. The verdict was unanimous. My bloodline was too diluted, too weak. I couldn't hold a mate bond. The wolf's ear twitched, the only sign it was still conscious and listening. Marcus tried for a while. Sera continued. Tried to make it work anyway, but you can't fight biology. Can't fight what's written in your blood. When Elena transferred to our pack, strong, dominant, perfect breeding stock, I knew it was over before he even said the words. She wiped at her eyes, frustrated by the tears that wouldn't stop coming. The worst part wasn't the rejection. It was how relieved everyone looked, like they'd been waiting for him to wake up and stop wasting his potential on a defective Omega. My own mother hugged Elena at the rejection ceremony, told her she'd make a wonderful addition to the family. The wolf's body shifted slightly, and suddenly its massive head was resting in her lap. The movement was clearly deliberate, clearly meant to comfort. Sera's breath hitched. She looked down at those amber eyes, now open and fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced. "You're a better listener than any therapist," she said with a watery laugh, running her fingers through the soft fur behind the wolf's ears. "And you don't even have to say anything to make me feel less alone." The wolf's eyes held hers for a long moment. Then, with what seemed like enormous effort, it lifted one massive paw and placed it on her knee. The gesture was so unmistakably human, so clearly deliberate, that Sera froze. "You really are in there, aren't you?" she whispered. "Trapped. The fever's so bad you can't shift back." The wolf's eyes closed once in what could only be described as a nod. Sera's mind raced. She'd heard of shifters getting stuck in their wolf forms due to trauma or injury, but it was rare. The fever must be interfering with whatever magic or biology allowed the transformation. "Okay," she said, thinking aloud. "Okay, so I need to break the fever. Once you can shift, you can tell me what you need, can help me help you properly. But how?" She had no medicine, no supplies beyond what nature provided. Unless... Sera's gaze drifted to the cave entrance, to the forest beyond. She'd seen wolfsbane growing near the stream where she'd filled her water bottle. Wolfsbane was poison to shifters in large doses, but in carefully measured amounts it could break fevers, force a shift, reset the body's systems. It was also incredibly dangerous. Too much would kill him. Too little would do nothing. "I have an idea," she said slowly. "But it's risky. I'd need to find wolfsbane, prepare it correctly, get the dosage perfect. And if I'm wrong, if I give you too much or your body reacts badly..." The wolf's paw pressed more firmly against her knee. Its eyes opened again, and in them, Sera saw complete trust. "Do it," those eyes said. "I trust you." "You shouldn't," she whispered. "I failed at everything else in my life. What if I fail at this too?" The wolf made a sound, a huff that was almost indignant. Then it turned its head, pressing its nose against her palm, and Sera felt the ghost of sensation she'd only heard about in stories. The whisper of what a true mate bond might feel like, warmth spreading from the point of contact, a sense of rightness, of belonging. It vanished as quickly as it came, probably a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress. But in that moment, Sera made her decision. "All right," she said, gently moving the wolf's head from her lap. "I'll do it. But you have to promise me something." She looked directly into those intelligent amber eyes. "Promise me you'll fight. Promise me you won't give up. Because I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I've just found something. Someone who makes me feel like maybe I'm not as worthless as everyone said." The wolf held her gaze steadily. Then, with visible effort, it lifted its head slightly and pressed its forehead to hers. The gesture was so tender, so intimate, that Sera felt tears spill over. "I'll be back soon," she promised, pulling away reluctantly. "Stay here, stay safe. I'll fix this." She grabbed her backpack and headed for the cave entrance, her mind already cataloging everything she'd need. Wolfsbane, wild garlic to counteract the poison if she miscalculated, fresh water to dilute the mixture. She didn't see the way the wolf watched her leave, didn't see the shimmer that passed over its form as it fought against the fever, trying desperately to shift, to speak, to tell her the truth. Didn't know that the creature she was risking everything to save wasn't just any shifter. He was Kael Thornwood, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, and when he could finally shift back, everything between them would change. But for now, in the growing darkness, he could only watch the entrance and pray that the brave, broken Omega who'd saved his life would make it back safely. Because somewhere in the fever and pain, he'd realized something that terrified him more than death. He was falling for her. Chapter 5. Into the dark. The forest felt different in the fading afternoon light. Darker, more menacing, as if the trees themselves were watching Sera's every move. She moved quickly but carefully, her eyes scanning the undergrowth for the distinctive purple blooms of wolfsbane. She'd seen it yesterday near the stream, had made a mental note of the location, even as she'd been focused on finding shelter from the storm. Now that knowledge might save the wolf's life. Kael. Something whispered in the back of her mind. His name is Kael. Sera shook her head, trying to clear the strange thought. She didn't know the wolf's name. Didn't know anything about him except that he was intelligent, wounded, and somehow tied to her in a way that defied logic. The stream came into view, its waters still swollen from the storm. Sera knelt at the bank, scanning the surrounding vegetation. There, a cluster of tall stalks with hooded purple flowers, growing in the shade of an old oak, wolfsbane, also called aconite, monk's hood, devil's helmet. Every part of it was poisonous, even to humans. Sera pulled her jacket sleeves down over her hands before carefully plucking several stems, making sure not to touch the plant with her bare skin. Just enough, she murmured to herself, remembering the lessons from the pack's healer. Too little does nothing. Too much stops the heart. She was placing the stems carefully in her backpack when she heard it, the snap of a branch behind her. Sera spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. A wolf stood at the edge of the clearing, not as large as her wolf, but still formidable, with gray fur and ice-blue eyes that tracked her with predatory focus. And it wasn't alone. 2 more emerged from the underbrush, flanking her position. Pack wolves. The hunters had doubled back. Easy, Sera said, raising her hand slowly. I'm just collecting herbs. I'm not a threat. The gray wolf shifted, its form rippling and reforming until a woman stood in its place, late 30s, muscular, with the same ice-blue eyes and an expression of cold assessment. She wore practical clothes that suggested she'd stashed them nearby before shifting. You're the Omega from this morning, the woman said. It wasn't a question. Yes. My warriors said you were camping in the cave system. The woman's eyes narrowed. Alone. That's right. So why do you smell like wolf blood? Fresh wolf blood, not from a simple scrape. Sera's mind raced. She couldn't tell the truth. They'd kill the wolf immediately. But lying to a dominant shifter was nearly impossible. They could scent deception. Unless you mix truth with lies so thoroughly, they couldn't separate them. I found a dead wolf yesterday, Sera said, letting real emotion color her voice. The fear, the sadness, the exhaustion were all genuine. During the storm, it was already gone, but I tried to help anyway. Checked for a pulse. Tried to see if I could do anything. I know it was stupid, but I couldn't just walk past. The woman studied her for a long moment. Where's the body? Washed away by the stream, Sera said, gesturing to the swollen waters. By the time I realized it was too late, the current had taken it. It wasn't entirely a lie. If she didn't get back soon with the wolfsbane, that might very well be the truth. What kind of wolf? One of the other shifters asked. A young man, still in wolf form, his mental voice pressing against Sera's mind in the way pack members could communicate. Big, Sera said. Black fur. I thought maybe it was one of yours, which is why I tried to help. The woman's expression shifted slightly. Not quite satisfaction, but close. You found the rogue. Did you see what killed it? No, just the injuries. They were... Sera swallowed hard, remembering the real wounds she'd been treating. They were bad, like something massive had torn into it. The woman nodded slowly. We've been tracking a territory dispute. A rogue alpha challenged our pack's claim to these woods. He killed 3 of our warriors before we drove him off. We've been hunting him for 2 days. Sera's blood ran cold. So the wolf, her wolf, was an alpha. A powerful one, if he'd taken down 3 trained warriors. But was he really a rogue? Or was there more to the story? He's dead now, the woman continued. Which means the threat is over. You should still leave this area. There might be others from his pack looking for him. I will, Sera promised. I just need to gather some more supplies first. I have a long journey ahead. The woman studied her for another moment, then jerked her head toward the other shifters. They melted back into the forest, and after one final assessing look, the woman shifted back to wolf form and followed. Sera waited until she was absolutely certain they were gone before releasing the breath she'd been holding. Her entire body was shaking, adrenaline making her hands tremble as she finished securing the wolfsbane in her pack. They think you're dead, she thought, hoping somehow the wolf could hear her across the distance. I bought us time. Just hold on. She gathered wild garlic next, then filled her water bottle from the stream. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and Sera knew she needed to get back before full dark. The forest was dangerous enough during the day, but as she turned to head back to the cave, something made her pause, a scent on the wind. Something that didn't belong, wrong somehow, predatory in a way that made her hindbrain scream danger. Sera's wolf senses had always been weak, her omega blood too diluted to give her the full range of shifter abilities. But even she could smell this, a musky, acrid odor that made her skin crawl. Not wolf, not bear. Something else. She remembered what the woman had said, like something massive had torn into it. What if the pack wolves had it wrong? What if her wolf hadn't been injured fighting the warriors? What if all of them had been attacked by something else? Something that was still out there, still hunting? Sera broke into a run. She crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at her clothes, her backpack bouncing painfully against her spine. The cave was still a quarter mile away, and darkness was falling fast, and that smell seemed to be following her. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But she didn't slow down, because suddenly, with horrible clarity, she understood. The wolf had been protecting pack territory when something attacked. He'd fought it, had driven it off but been mortally wounded in the process. The warriors had found him in the aftermath, had assumed he was the threat, and he'd been too injured to explain, too weak to shift back and speak. And now that thing knew there was wounded prey in these woods. Sera saw the cave entrance ahead and put on a final burst of speed. She practically dove through the opening, stumbling to her knees on the stone floor. The wolf raised its head weakly, those amber eyes widening when they saw her disheveled state. Something's out there, Sera gasped, struggling to catch her breath. Something that's not pack, not rogue. Something worse. The wolf tried to stand, its lips pulling back in a warning snarl despite the fever, despite the injuries. No, Sera said firmly, moving to its side. You can barely stand, but that's why I'm going to do this now, right now, before that thing finds us. She pulled out the wolfsbane with trembling hands, began crushing the flowers and stems with a rock, mixing them carefully with water in her bottle. The amount had to be perfect, enough to shock his system into shifting, not enough to poison him. I need you to trust me one more time, she whispered, meeting those intelligent amber eyes. I need you to drink this and then fight. Fight the fever. Fight the wolf form. Fight everything until you can shift back. Can you do that? The wolf held her gaze steadily. Then, slowly, it nodded. Sera brought the mixture to its muzzle, tilting the bottle carefully. The wolf drank without hesitation, swallowing the bitter liquid even though every instinct must have been screaming at it to refuse the poison. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the wolf's entire body convulsed. No. Sera grabbed its head, holding on as tremors racked the massive frame. Come on, fight it. You have to shift. The wolf's eyes rolled back, foam flecking its muzzle. Sera felt tears streaming down her face, terror gripping her heart. She'd killed him. She'd miscalculated and killed the one creature who'd made her feel like she mattered. Then the wolf's body began to shimmer, and in the darkness of the cave, as something howled in the forest outside, something that wasn't wolf at all, the transformation finally began. Chapter 6. The Alpha Revealed. The shift was violent. Sera had seen transformations before, smooth, controlled changes that took seconds. This was nothing like that. The wolf's body contorted, bones cracking and reforming with sounds that made her stomach turn. Fur receded in patches, revealing skin that was feverish and slick with sweat. "Stay with me," Sera pleaded, her hands hovering over the shifting form, desperate to help, but not knowing how. "Please stay with me." The shimmer intensified, and suddenly where the massive wolf had been, a man lay gasping on the cave floor. Sera's breath caught. He was huge, even collapsed and injured. She could see the raw power in his frame. Broad shoulders, muscled chest marked with angry red scars that matched the wound she'd been treating, dark hair plastered to his forehead with fever sweat. The splint she'd made for the wolf's leg was now strapped to a very human calf, the broken bone visible beneath bruised skin, but it was his face that made her heart stutter. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, lips pressed together in a grimace of pain. And when his eyes finally opened, those same amber eyes that had watched her so intently, she saw intelligence, strength, and something that looked like relief. "You did it," he rasped, his voice rough from disuse and fever. "You actually did it." Sera scrambled for her backpack, pulling out the only blanket she had and draping it over his lower half. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the fabric. "Don't try to move," she said, forcing herself into healer mode because otherwise she might collapse from the shock of seeing him. "The fever's still high, and your leg—" "I know." He tried to push himself up, managed to get his elbows under him before his arms gave out. He cursed, something guttural and frustrated. "How long was I stuck?" 2 days. I found you during the storm." Sera knelt beside him, pressing her hand to his forehead, still burning hot but not as bad as before. "The fever was preventing the shift. The wolfsbane forced it, but you're not out of danger yet." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Sera felt that same pull she'd experienced when their eyes first met. Stronger now, more insistent, like invisible threads binding them together. "You saved my life," he said quietly, "even though you had no idea who I was, even though those hunters told you I was dangerous." "You are dangerous," Sera replied, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "You killed 3 warriors, but that doesn't mean you deserve to die alone in the woods." Something flickered across his face, pain that had nothing to do with his injuries. "I didn't kill them. I tried to save them." Before Sera could respond, that howl sounded again, closer now, raising every hair on the back of her neck. The man's entire body tensed. "Wendigo," he breathed, his face going pale. "It's still here. It's hunting. What's a wendigo?" "Ancient predator. Feeds on shifters. Grows stronger with each kill." He tried again to sit up, his jaw clenched with determination. "Those warriors, they were tracking it when it ambushed them. I heard the fight, tried to intervene. Managed to drive it off, but..." He gestured weakly at his injuries. "And the pack thought you were the killer," Sera finished, understanding clicking into place. "They found me standing over the bodies, covered in blood. Their blood and mine." His amber eyes met hers. They didn't stop to ask questions, and I was too injured to explain before they attacked. Another howl, definitely closer. Sera could hear something moving through the underbrush outside. Something large, something that made the forest go quiet in its wake. "Can you shift back?" she asked urgently. "Can you fight it?" He tried. She saw the shimmer start around his hands, but it fizzled out almost immediately. He sagged back, breathing hard. "Not yet. The wolfsbane forced 1 shift, but my body's too weak for another. I need hours to recover, maybe days." "We don't have hours." Sera looked around the cave frantically, searching for anything that could be used as a weapon. A stick, some rocks, nothing that would stop a creature powerful enough to kill trained warriors. "You need to run," the man said, his voice taking on a commanding tone that made her spine straighten involuntarily. "Now, while it's focused on me, head east toward the human settlements. Don't stop. Don't look back." "Absolutely not. That wasn't a request." His eyes flashed with authority. with the unmistakable power of an alpha used to being obeyed. I won't watch you die because you were foolish enough to save me. Sera laughed, a sharp, slightly hysterical sound. You think I spent 2 days keeping you alive just to abandon you the second you wake up? I don't care if you're an alpha or a king or the moon goddess herself. I'm not leaving. His expression shifted. Surprise, frustration, and beneath that, something that looked like admiration. You're insane. Maybe. Sera grabbed the largest rock she could find, testing its weight. But I'm also the only thing standing between you and whatever that thing is. So unless you can shift in the next 30 seconds, you're stuck with me. He stared at her for a long moment, and Sera saw the calculation in his eyes, weighing his options, considering arguments, probably thinking of ways to force her to leave. Then his expression softened into something she couldn't quite read. What's your name? He asked quietly. Sera. Sera Whitmore. Sera. He said it like he was testing how it felt in his mouth, like he was memorizing it. I'm Kael. Kael Thornwood. The name hit her like a physical blow. Thornwood, the Northern Territory's ruling family, which meant the man lying broken in front of her wasn't just an alpha. He was the Alpha King. Oh, she breathed. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Despite everything, the pain, the danger, the creature hunting them, Kael smiled. A real smile that transformed his harsh features into something almost beautiful. I'm told I have terrible timing. Before Sera could respond, the howl came again, so close now it seemed to vibrate through the cave walls. And beneath the howl, she heard something worse. The sound of claws scraping against stone. It had found them. Kael tried once more to shift, his body trembling with the effort. But he was too weak, too injured. The shimmer died before it could take hold, leaving him gasping and human and defenseless. Sera positioned herself between Kael and the cave entrance, the rock gripped in both hands. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to save herself, but something deeper, something that had nothing to do with logic or self-preservation, kept her feet planted. She'd chosen this. Chosen him, and she would see it through. Sera, Kael said behind her, his voice rough with emotion she couldn't name. If we survive this, I need you to know. Tell me after, she interrupted, her eyes locked on the cave entrance. After we survive. Give me something to look forward to. She heard him draw in a sharp breath, felt his gaze on her back, intense and burning. Then the creature appeared in the entrance. It had been human once, maybe. Now it was something else, stretched and twisted, with skin pulled too tight over elongated bones, eyes that glowed with sick hunger, and a mouth full of too many teeth. It moved wrong, like its joints bent in directions they shouldn't, and the smell that rolled off it was decay and ancient malice. The wendigo fixed its glowing eyes on Sera, and she saw her death reflected in their depths. But she didn't run. She raised her rock, planted her feet and thought, not today. He doesn't die today. We don't die today. Behind her, she heard Kael struggling to stand, heard him trying desperately to shift despite his body's betrayal. And as the wendigo lunged forward with impossible speed, Sera did the only thing she could think of. She threw herself forward to meet it, buying Kael precious seconds, buying them both a chance, because sometimes love wasn't about pretty words or perfect moments. Sometimes it was about standing between the person you'd just met and the monster that wanted to destroy them, even if it cost you everything. Chapter 7. Blood and Silver. The wendigo's claws caught Sera across the shoulder, sending her spinning into the cave wall. Pain exploded through her body, white-hot and blinding. She felt warm blood soaking through her shirt, felt her knees buckle. But she forced herself to stay standing, forced herself to turn and face the creature as it advanced. Sera! Kael's voice was raw with anguish and fury. The wendigo moved with horrible, jerking speed, faster than anything that size should be able to move. It reached for her with those elongated fingers, each one tipped with black claws that dripped with something viscous and foul. Sera swung the rock with everything she had. It connected with the creature's skull with a sickening crunch. The wendigo shrieked, a sound that was nothing like an animal, nothing like anything natural, and stumbled back, But it didn't fall. It turned those glowing eyes on her, and Sera saw hunger there. "Endless, bottomless hunger. That all you got, little Omega?" The words came out distorted, barely recognizable as human speech. "Your blood smells weak, useless, but his..." It turned its gaze toward Kael. "Alpha King blood. That will make me strong." It lunged past Sera, dismissing her as irrelevant, and something inside her snapped. Later, she wouldn't be able to explain what happened, wouldn't be able to put into words the rage that flooded through her, rage at being called weak, at being dismissed, at watching this thing try to take away the one person who'd made her feel like she mattered. All she knew was that her blood suddenly felt like it was on fire. Sera threw herself at the Wendigo's back, wrapping her arms around its neck. The creature thrashed, trying to shake her off, its skin burning cold against her bare arms. She held on, her injured shoulder screaming in protest, her whole body shaking with effort. "Get away from him," she snarled, and her voice sounded different, deeper, resonant with a power she didn't recognize. The Wendigo froze. Then it began to scream. Where Sera's skin touched the creature's flesh, smoke was rising. The Wendigo's skin was blistering, blackening, as if her touch itself was poison. "Impossible!" it shrieked, throwing itself backward against the cave wall, trying to crush her. "You're nothing. You're weak." But Sera held on, and wherever she touched, the creature burned. From his position on the cave floor, Kael watched with wide eyes. "Sera, your hands!" She looked down and gasped. Her hands were glowing with a soft silver light, like moonlight made solid. The light spread up her arms, wrapping around the Wendigo like luminescent chains. The creature's movements became more frantic, more desperate. It slammed itself against the walls, the floor, anything to dislodge her. Sera's grip slipped, her injured shoulder unable to hold, and she fell hard onto the stone floor. The Wendigo rounded on her, its burned flesh already starting to regenerate, its eyes blazing with renewed hunger and rage. "I'll kill you slow for that, little wolf," it hissed. "Make you watch while I feast on your king's bones." It raised its claws for a killing blow, and Kael roared. The sound shook the cave, deeper than human, resonant with ancient power despite his broken body. The Alpha King's command, the voice that could force submission from any shifter, rolled through the space like thunder. The Wendigo hesitated. Just for a second, it was enough. Kael's body shimmered, and though he couldn't complete the shift, couldn't transform fully, his hands changed. Claws erupted from his fingertips, longer and sharper than any normal shifter's. He lunged forward on his good leg, moving with the last reserves of his strength, and drove those claws deep into the Wendigo's back. The creature screamed and whirled, backhanding Kael across the cave. He hit the wall with a sickening crack and crumpled, his hands shifting back to human as consciousness fled. "Kael." Sera scrambled to her feet, ignoring her own injuries. The Wendigo turned back to her, slower now, more cautious. Its regeneration had stopped where Sera had burned it, the flesh remaining blackened and dead. "What are you?" it demanded, circling her warily. "I don't know," Sera admitted, raising her hands. They were still glowing that strange silver light, brighter now, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "But I know you're not getting past me." The Wendigo feinted left, then right, testing her. Sera tracked its movements, her body moving on instincts she didn't know she possessed. Every time it tried to get around her to reach Kael's unconscious form, she cut it off, her glowing hands forcing it back. "You can't keep this up forever," the creature hissed. "That light, it's burning through you. I can smell it. You're consuming yourself to make it." Sera realized with horror that it was right. Her hands were starting to hurt. A deep ache that went beyond the surface burns the Wendigo's cold flesh had left. The silver light was coming from somewhere inside her, some reservoir she'd never known existed, and she could feel it draining with each passing second. But Kael needed time to wake up, needed time to heal enough to shift properly, so she held her ground. "Then I guess you'd better make your move before I burn out," she said, surprised by how calm she sounded. "Because the second you get past me, the Alpha King is going to tear you apart." The Wendigo laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. "He's unconscious, broken, and you're nearly dead on your feet. This cave will be your tomb, little Omega," it charged. Sera met it head-on, grabbing its wrists, feeling her silver light searing into its flesh. The creature howled and thrashed, its supernatural strength pushing her backward, step by step, toward the cave wall. She was losing. The light was fading, her strength giving out. The wendigo's claws were inches from her throat, getting closer with each passing second. "I'm sorry, Kael," she thought. "I wasn't strong enough after all." Then she felt it, a warm hand closing around her ankle. She glanced down. Kael was conscious, barely, his amber eyes blazing with determination. His touch sent a jolt through her body, and suddenly the silver light wasn't draining anymore. It was growing, fed by something that flowed between them, his strength joining hers, their power intertwining in a way that felt ancient and inevitable. Mate bond, some distant part of her recognized. This is what a mate bond feels like. The silver light exploded outward, engulfing the wendigo completely. The creature's screams reached a crescendo, then cut off abruptly. Its body disintegrated, turning to ash that scattered across the cave floor, leaving behind only the echo of its hunger and malice. Sera collapsed. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Somehow, impossibly, Kael was on his feet, cradling her against his chest despite his own injuries. The mate bond pulsed between them, stronger than pain, stronger than exhaustion. "You shouldn't be able to stand," Sera mumbled against his chest. "You shouldn't have been able to burn a wendigo with your bare hands," Kael replied, his voice rough with emotion. Seams were both full of surprises. He carefully lowered them both to the cave floor, keeping her tucked against his side. Sera's shoulder throbbed where the wendigo had clawed her, and she could feel blood still seeping from the wound. But Kael's warmth surrounding her made it bearable. "What was that?" she asked quietly. "That silver light?" "Moon magic." Kael's hand stroked her hair gently. "Pure, ancient moon magic. The kind that hasn't been seen in generations. The kind that only flows through the strongest bloodlines." Sera laughed weakly. "That's impossible. I'm a failed Omega. My blood is too weak to even hold a mate bond. Your old pack was wrong." Kael tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his amber eyes. In them, she saw certainty, reverence, and something that made her breath catch. "Your blood isn't weak, Sera. It's dormant. Waiting for the right catalyst." "What catalyst?" His thumb brushed across her cheek. "A true mate bond. With someone strong enough to wake what's sleeping inside you?" Sera's heart stuttered. "You mean, I felt it the moment you found me in the woods," Kael said softly. "Even through the pain, even through the fever, I knew. You're mine, Sera Whitmore, and I'm yours. The moon chose us for each other." Tears burned in Sera's eyes. "Your pack will never accept me. The other alphas will say I'm too weak, that I'm not worthy. Let them try." His voice dropped to a growl. "You just killed a wendigo to protect me. You saved my life not once, but 3 times. Any wolf who questions your worth will answer to me." He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers, and Sera felt the mate bond singing between them. Silver light and amber power, weakness and strength. 2 broken souls finding wholeness in each other. "I'm still scared," she whispered. "So am I," Kael admitted, "but we'll figure it out, together." Outside, dawn was breaking. Inside the cave, 2 souls bound by fate began to heal. The real journey was just beginning. Chapter 8. Wounds and truth. The morning sun filtered through the cave entrance, painting everything in soft gold. Sera woke to find herself still wrapped in Kael's arms, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For a moment, she let herself pretend this was normal, that waking up in the arms of an Alpha King was something that happened to ordinary failed Omegas, that the previous night's battle had been a fever dream. Then she shifted, and pain lanced through her shoulder, bringing reality crashing back. "Easy," Kael murmured, his hand steadying her. "That wound needs cleaning. The wendigo's claws carry infection." Sera looked down at the torn fabric of her shirt, at the 4 parallel gashes across her shoulder that had stopped bleeding but looked angry and inflamed. "I'll add it to the list of things trying to kill me this week." Kael's expression darkened. "Let me see." He helped her sit up, moving with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his size and power. His own injuries were still severe, the broken leg, the deep wounds across his torso. But the mate bond must have given him enough strength to function. Or maybe he was just that stubborn. Sera let him carefully peel away the torn fabric, hissing when it stuck to dried blood. Kael's jaw clenched, but his hands remained steady as he examined the wound. "It's deep," he said quietly, "but clean. Your moon magic probably burned away the worst of the infection when it manifested." "About that." Sera met his eyes. "How is it possible? Every test the pack healers ran said my bloodline was diluted beyond use, that I had barely enough shifter blood to qualify as Omega." Kael reached for her backpack, pulling out what remained of her first aid supplies, because they were looking for wolf magic. Moon magic is different, rarer. It runs through specific bloodlines, the old families that served the moon goddess directly before the Great War. "I don't understand. My family isn't, we're nobody. Just Omegas going back generations." "Or," Kael said carefully, dabbing antiseptic on her wounds, "what if your family has been hiding? The old bloodlines were hunted during the war. Many went into hiding, suppressed their power, pretended to be common wolves to survive." Sera's mind raced back through fragmented memories. Her grandmother's stories about the old ways, always told in whispers. Her mother's insistence that she never try too hard, never draw attention. The strange dreams she'd had as a child of silver moonlight and ancient songs. "My grandmother used to say our family was cursed," she said slowly. "That we were meant for greatness, but the moon had turned her face from us. Not cursed, protected." Kael's thumb brushed gently across unblemished skin near her wound, and Sera felt the mate bond pulse at the contact. The moon goddess doesn't abandon her chosen. She hides them until the time is right. And this is the right time? Getting my mate rejected? Being cast out, nearly dying in the woods? Kael's hand stilled. His amber eyes met hers, and she saw pain there that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. "Marcus was never your mate," he said quietly. "The bond didn't form because he wasn't yours to claim. The moon knew you were meant for someone else. For you. For me." He returned his attention to bandaging her shoulder, but Sera could see the tension in his jaw. "Though I'm not sure I deserve such a gift. Not after everything I've done, everything I've failed to do." Sera caught his hand, stopping him. "What do you mean?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. "I wasn't in these woods by accident. I've been tracking the wendigo for 3 weeks, ever since it started hunting along our northern border." His voice was rough, heavy with guilt. "It killed 2 members of my pack before I even realized what we were dealing with. By the time I tracked it here, it had already taken 3 warriors from the local pack. The ones they blamed you for." He nodded. "I drove it off, but barely. It wounded me worse than I've ever been wounded, and I couldn't shift back. Couldn't call for help. I thought..." He paused, his throat working. "I thought I would die alone in these woods, and my pack would never know what happened. Would never know I'd failed them." Sera squeezed his hand. "You didn't fail. You saved them. That thing is dead now. Because of you." Kael turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. "You who had every reason to leave me, who owed me nothing. You saved me 3 times, Sera. And I can't even begin to... Don't." She pressed her other hand to his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. "Don't turn this into a debt. I didn't save you because of duty or obligation. I saved you because..." She trailed off, searching for words. "Because the mate bond called to you," Kael finished softly, "even before we knew what it was. Even before either of us was ready for it." "I felt it," Sera admitted. "When I found you, that pull. Like something was telling me that if I walked away, I'd lose the most important thing I'd ever have." Kael raised their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was so tender it made her breath catch. "I felt it too," he said. "Even through the pain. Your scent. It called to every part of me. My wolf recognized you before my human mind could process it." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the bond settling between them. Outside, birds were beginning to sing, and the forest was coming alive with morning sounds. Inside the cave, 2 people who should never have met were trying to figure out what came next. "I have to go back," Kael finally said. To my territory, my pack. They'll be searching for me by now, probably think I'm dead. Sera's stomach dropped. Of course. I understand. You have responsibilities, and you're coming with me. His tone left no room for argument. As my mate. As my queen. Kael, I can't. Your pack won't accept me. I'm a nobody from a nobody pack. They'll demand you choose someone stronger, someone who isn't you? His eyes flashed with gold. I don't care what they demand. The moon chose you for me. That's the highest authority there is. But politically... Sera? He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. I've spent 30 years doing what's politically expedient, making alliances through empty courtships with she-wolves who wanted my crown more than they wanted me. I've given everything to duty, to responsibility, to being the perfect alpha king. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she saw raw honesty in his expression. Then I met you, this fierce, impossible woman who fought a wendigo with her bare hands to protect me, who has more courage in her smallest finger than most warriors have in their entire bodies. You think I'm going to let politics take that away? Your advisors will hate me. Then I'll get new advisors. Your pack will question you. Then I'll prove them wrong. He leaned forward until their foreheads touched. I'm not asking you to be perfect, Sera. I'm asking you to be mine. To stand beside me while we figure out what your power means, where it comes from, to help me be a better king than I've been. Sera felt tears burning in her eyes. I'm terrified. Good. His lips quirked in a small smile. So am I. We can be terrified together. She laughed despite herself, the sound breaking into a sob. Kael pulled her closer, careful of her injured shoulder, and held her while she cried, for everything she'd lost, for everything she'd found, for the impossible future stretching out before them. When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, she found him watching her with such tenderness it made her heart ache. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll come with you. I'll try. That's all I ask. He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. Now, let's get out of this cave. We have a long journey ahead, and I need to find a way to explain to my pack why their king disappeared for 3 days and came back with a mate. Sera helped him stand, supporting his weight while he tested his injured leg. The splint held, but she could see the pain it caused him. Can you make it? With you beside me? His smile was genuine, transforming his face. I can do anything. As they stepped out of the cave into the morning light, Sera felt the mate bond humming between them, uncertain, new, but stronger than fear. They'd survived the darkness. Now they just had to survive the light. Chapter 9. The Pack's Judgment. They'd been walking for less than an hour when Kael stopped abruptly, his head tilting in the way that meant he was listening to something Sera's weaker senses couldn't detect. They're close, he said quietly. My wolves. They've been searching. Sera's stomach tightened with anxiety. This was it, the moment where fantasy would collide with reality, where the Alpha King who'd claimed her as his mate in the privacy of a cave would have to present her to his pack, a pack that would see only a failed Omega from a backwater territory. Kael, she started, but he squeezed her hand. Trust me, he said simply. Before she could respond, wolves began emerging from the tree line, dozens of them, all massive, all moving with the coordinated precision of trained warriors. They surrounded Sera and Kael in seconds, forming a protective circle. Then, as one, they shifted. Sera had never seen so many naked shifters at once. She kept her eyes firmly on Kael as his wolves materialized into their human forms, clothes appearing from packs they'd carried or stashed nearby. The efficiency of it spoke to years of working together, of trust built through countless battles. A tall man with silver-streaked dark hair pushed to the front of the group. His eyes, sharp and assessing, locked onto Kael with visible relief before shifting to Sera with immediate suspicion. My king, the man said, dropping to one knee. The others followed suit, a wave of submission that made Sera's skin prickle. Thank the moon goddess. We've been searching for 3 days. The Wendigo is dead, Kael interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Thanks to my mate. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye turned to Sera. She felt their assessment like a physical weight, their wolves sensing her bloodline, judging her strength, finding her wanting. She saw the confusion in their expressions, the disbelief. The silver-haired man rose slowly, his gaze never leaving Sera. "Your mate? My king?" "But she's mine," Kael growled, and the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop. "Sera Whitmore, bearer of moon magic, slayer of the wendigo that killed our brothers. She saved my life 3 times and stood against a creature that has hunted our kind since the old wars." "Moon magic?" A woman stepped forward, tall, muscular, with copper hair and eyes like ice. "That's impossible. Moon magic hasn't manifested in generations. And she's..." The woman's nose wrinkled slightly. "Omega. Weak bloodline." Sera felt the words like a physical blow, even though she'd expected them. Old wounds, reopened. But Kael's hand tightened around hers, grounding her. "Captain Lyra," Kael said, his voice deadly calm, "you will show my mate the respect she's due, or you will find yourself explaining to the pack why you questioned your king's judgment." Lyra's jaw clenched, but she dipped her head. "My apologies, my king, but surely you understand our concern. The pack has been waiting for you to choose a mate for years. To appear with an unknown Omega, claiming she possesses lost magic. I don't claim it. I witnessed it." Kael's eyes swept over his assembled pack. "The wendigo that killed 3 of our brothers, that wounded me nearly to death, burned to ash under her touch. Her moon magic destroyed what our claws could not." "Then show us," another warrior called out, younger, with challenge in his tone. "If she's truly moon-blessed, prove it." Sera's heart hammered. She had no idea how to summon that silver light again. It had come from pure desperation, from the need to protect Kael. She couldn't just... "No," Kael said flatly. "My mate doesn't perform tricks for your entertainment. She's injured, exhausted, and under my protection. You will accept what I tell you, or you will challenge me for the right to lead this pack." The young warrior paled and immediately dropped his gaze. "I meant no disrespect, Alpha King." The silver-haired man, who Sera was beginning to realize must be Kael's second-in-command, cleared his throat. "My king, perhaps a more private discussion would be appropriate. There are political considerations. The council has been pressuring you to choose a mate from one of the allied packs. To appear with an outsider without warning. I don't answer to the council, Victor. They answer to me." Kael's voice carried such command that even Sera felt the urge to submit. "And my choice is made. Sera is my mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself. Anyone who disputes this disputes the goddess's will." Victor's expression remained carefully neutral, but Sera saw the calculation in his eyes. This man was thinking ahead, weighing consequences, planning for complications. "Of course, my king," Victor said smoothly. "We would never question the moon's wisdom. But perhaps the lady would be more comfortable if we could provide her with proper clothing, medical attention." "Yes," Kael agreed. "We'll return to the pack house immediately. Sera needs her wounds treated by a proper healer." As the pack began organizing for the journey, Lyra moved closer to Sera. The woman's expression was guarded, but not overtly hostile. "You killed a wendigo?" she asked quietly. Sera met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "I fought it. We killed it together. Wendigos are ancient evil, immune to normal weapons. Our legends say only moon-blessed can truly harm them." Lyra studied her intently. "Yet you smell like common pack. Like someone who's been rejected." "I was rejected," Sera said, lifting her chin. 3 days ago my pack cast me out for being too weak. Told me I wasn't worthy of bearing pups. Wasn't worthy of belonging." Lyra's expression flickered with something. Not quite sympathy, but understanding perhaps. "And now you're supposed to be our queen." "I don't know what I'm supposed to be," Sera admitted. "I only know that when Kael needed me, I didn't run. When that creature tried to kill him, I stood in its way. Not because I'm strong or blessed or worthy, but because walking away wasn't an option." For the first time, something like respect crossed Lyra's face. "You love him." It wasn't a question, but Sera answered anyway. "I barely know him, but yes, I think I do." "Love alone won't be enough," Lyra warned. "The pack will test you. The council will try to remove you. Every unmated she-wolf who thought she had a chance at the crown will want your blood. I know. Sera glanced over at Kael, who was speaking quietly with Victor. But I'm not walking away. Not from him, not from this. Lyra studied her for another long moment, then nodded slowly. Good. Because if you're going to be our queen, you'll need to be unbreakable. We follow strength, and right now all we see is a frightened Omega. Then I'll show you something different, Sera said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. I'll show you that strength isn't just claws and dominance, that sometimes the bravest thing is standing your ground when everyone tells you to run. A hint of a smile crossed Lyra's face. I hope so, for your sake and his, because the Alpha King showing weakness by choosing an inappropriate mate could tear this pack apart. She walked away before Sera could respond, leaving her alone with those words echoing in her mind. Kael appeared at her side a moment later, his expression concerned. What did Lyra say to you? The truth, Sera replied, that this is going to be harder than either of us thought. Are you having second thoughts? Sera looked up at him. This powerful alpha who'd chosen her despite everything, who'd defended her against his own pack, who looked at her like she was precious rather than worthless. No, she said firmly. No second thoughts, just determination to prove them all wrong. Kael's smile was fierce and proud. That's my queen. He pulled her close, mindful of her injured shoulder, and pressed a kiss to her temple. Around them, his pack prepared for the journey home, their whispers and sidelong glances making it clear that the battle for acceptance was only beginning. But as Sera leaned into Kael's strength, felt the mate bond singing between them, she thought maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. If they could survive a Wendigo together, they could survive anything, even pack politics, even doubt, even the weight of two worlds colliding. They'd figure it out, together. Chapter 10. The Pack House. The Northern Territory pack house was nothing like Sera had imagined. She'd expected something rustic, a large cabin maybe, or a lodge surrounded by forest. Instead, as they crested the final hill, she saw what could only be described as a mansion, 3 stories of stone and timber, with wings stretching out on either side, surrounded by manicured grounds that transitioned seamlessly into wild forest. Home, Kael said quietly beside her, and Sera heard the complicated emotion in that single word. They'd traveled for hours, Kael leaning on her more than he'd admit, his broken leg making every step agony despite his attempts to hide it. The pack had offered to carry him, but he'd refused, determined to walk into his territory on his own feet, with his mate at his side. Now, as they approached the massive front doors, Sera felt every eye on them. Pack members had gathered, drawn by news of their Alpha King's return, by curiosity about the strange Omega he'd brought home. She heard the whispers, felt the weight of their judgment. She's so small. That's his mate. She looks like a strong wind could knock her over. Moon magic, from her? Someone's been breathing too much wolfsbane. Sera straightened her spine, lifting her chin. She might look like nothing to them, but she'd fought a Wendigo and lived. She wouldn't let their doubt make her small. The doors opened before they reached them, and a woman emerged who made Sera's breath catch. She was stunning, tall, with long black hair and features that belonged in a magazine. Her body was all curves and confidence, and she wore a dress that suggested she'd been waiting for Kael's return. Kael, the woman breathed, rushing forward. Thank the goddess. When we heard about the Wendigo... She reached for him, but stopped short when she saw Sera. Her green eyes widened, then narrowed. Who is this? Celine, Kael said, his voice carefully neutral. This is Sera Whitmore, my mate. Celine's perfect face went through a series of expressions. Shock, disbelief, and finally, poorly concealed rage. Your mate? But Kael, we had an understanding. The council approved our union. I've been preparing for the mating ceremony. There was no understanding, Kael interrupted firmly. I never agreed to mate with you, Celine. The council pushed for it. Your father pushed for it. But I never consented. But I'm the Alpha's daughter from the Eastern Territory, Celine protested, her voice rising. I'm strong, pure-blooded, politically connected. And She looked Sera up and down with obvious disdain. Nobody. A weak omega who smells like rejection and failure. The words hit exactly where they were meant to. But before Sera could respond, Kael stepped forward, putting himself partially between them. "Sera is the woman who saved my life," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Who killed the wendigo that nearly destroyed me. Who possesses moon magic that hasn't been seen in 3 generations. She is my mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself. And you will show her respect, or you will leave my territory, immediately." Celine's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You can't be serious. The council serves at my pleasure, not the other way around." Kael's eyes flashed gold. "Now, you can either welcome your queen with grace, or you can pack your things. Choose quickly." For a moment, Sera thought Celine might actually challenge him. But the woman's wolf recognized the dominance in Kael's tone, the absolute authority. She dropped her gaze, though fury radiated from every line of her body. "Of course, Alpha King," she said through gritted teeth. "Welcome, Sera." She turned and stalked back into the house, her dress swishing dramatically. Victor appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully blank. "My king, perhaps we should get you both to the healer. And then the council will want to meet with you. Tomorrow," Kael said firmly. "Today Sera needs rest and medical care. The council can wait." He took Sera's hand and led her into the pack house, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed them. Inside was even more impressive. Vaulted ceilings, a grand staircase, tapestries depicting wolf legends on the walls. This was supposed to be her home now. The place where she'd live as queen. Sera had never felt more out of place in her life. A kind-faced older woman appeared, introducing herself as Clara, the head healer. She led them to a suite on the 2nd floor. Rooms that were clearly Kael's, decorated in dark woods and deep blues, with windows overlooking the forest. "I'll examine you both," Clara said, her tone brooking no argument. "Alpha King first, since you're clearly about to collapse." Kael looked like he wanted to protest, but Sera squeezed his hand. "Let her help you, please." He relented, lowering himself onto the bed with visible relief. Clara got to work immediately, examining his broken leg with gentle efficiency. "This splint saved the limb," she said, glancing at Sera. "Did you set this?" "Yes," Sera admitted quietly. Clara's eyebrows rose. "You have training?" "Some. I helped with healing in my old pack." "You did excellent work. The bone's already starting to knit properly." Clara looked at her with new respect. "Now let me see your shoulder." Sera let the healer examine the wendigo's claw marks, trying not to flinch as Clara cleaned and rebandaged the wounds. "These should have festered by now," Clara murmured. "Wendigo infections are notoriously difficult to treat, but they're clean, almost like something burned away the poison. Moon magic," Kael said quietly from the bed. "It protected her even as it destroyed the wendigo." Clara's sharp eyes moved between them. "So it's true then. The moon has blessed her." "You sound like you believe it," Sera said, surprised. "Child, I've been healing wolves for 60 years. I've seen things that would make most people question reality." Clara finished bandaging Sera's shoulder with practiced efficiency. "If the Alpha King says you bear moon magic, who am I to doubt? Though I suspect you have no idea how to control it yet." "I don't," Sera admitted. "It just happened, when I needed it most." "That's how it always starts," Clara said cryptically. "The power recognizing necessity before the bearer recognizes the power." She stood, gathering her supplies. "Rest, both of you. Especially you, Alpha King. That leg needs at least 2 weeks before you should even think about shifting." After Clara left, Sera found herself alone with Kael in his private chambers. The intimacy of it, seeing his space, his books on the nightstand, his clothes in the closet, made her suddenly shy. "You can take the bed," Kael said, watching her with those perceptive amber eyes. "I'll sleep on the couch." "Don't be ridiculous. You're injured worse than I am." Sera gestured to the massive bed. "It's big enough for both of us. And besides, we're mates. We've already slept together in a cave. A smile tugged at his lips. That we have. They settled onto opposite sides of the bed, careful of their injuries. Sera lay there in the growing darkness, acutely aware of Kael's presence just inches away, of the mate bond humming between them. Sera? Kael's voice was quiet. Yes? Thank you. For standing beside me today. For not running when you saw what you're walking into. She rolled onto her side to face him, finding his amber eyes glowing softly in the darkness. I told you. I'm not running. Not from you. Not from this. He reached across the space between them, his hand finding hers. Their fingers intertwined, and Sera felt the mate bond strengthen, settling deeper into her bones. Tomorrow will be harder, he warned. The council will push back. Selene's father is influential. There will be challenges, tests, political maneuvering. Then tomorrow we'll face it together, Sera said simply. But tonight we rest, we heal. We remember why we're doing this. And why is that? Sera moved closer, closing the distance between them, resting her head on his shoulder. His arm came around her automatically, holding her carefully against his chest. Because the moon chose us, she whispered. Because when I found you dying in the woods, something in me recognized something in you. Because this, she pressed her hand over his heart, feels more right than anything in my entire life. She felt his lips brush against her hair. Sleep, my fierce little moon witch. Tomorrow we show them all exactly what we're made of. Sera closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat, feeling safe despite everything. Tomorrow would bring battles. But tonight, they had each other, and that was enough.